Thank you very much. Welcome to the Fitzgerald Theater. Thank you all for coming out on this gorgeous evening when you should have been outdoors. And we will try to make this evening worth your while. Welcome to the Fitzgerald Theater, named for St. Paul author, who as a boy used to sit up in the second balcony up there and watch plays on stage, and then went back home to Laurel Avenue to tell his family the whole story, and thus developed his narrative skills. Our guest, Mr. Bill Moyers, is in town for a very important event for his grandson's graduation last night, so that's how he happens to be here. He's not just out flogging a book. He's here on important business, and we managed to hold him over for a day. Mr. Bill Moyers was born in Hugo, Oklahoma, 1934. Hugo's a little tiny town just up above the Texas border. His father, Henry Moyers, was a day laborer. He was an odd jobs man, a handyman. He did whatever he could to get along. His mother, Ruby, was a woman who was familiar with poverty and with pain. She lost 3 babies in childbirth, 2 before Bill was born and 1 after, all of them girls. This was a devout Southern Baptist family. Henry Moyers was a deacon of the Baptist church in Hugo and then in Marshall, Texas, when the family moved down to Marshall, which is just on the other side of the Texas border, the Oklahoma-Texas border. He was an unusual Southern Baptist. At least we would look on him as unusual because, as well as being a fundamentalist and a born-again true believer, he was also a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat and a supporter of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's a very interesting combination to us today. If there were a Henry Moyers around, we'd have to put him in a museum, and so that we could study him. Bill Moyers was an ambitious, hard-working young man. He was too light to play football, so he became a cheerleader. He wrote for the school paper. He was attentive to his church. He was there on Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings, and he was there for Wednesday evening prayer meeting as well, and young people's and Bible reading and all. He was very much involved. He wrote for the school newspaper. He worked at the grocery store. And he got the attention of a man named Millard Cope, who was the editor of the News Messenger, the Marshall News Messenger, small-town paper. Millard Cope took an interest in him, hired him to write for the paper, and it was Millard Cope, a conservative Democrat, who wrote a letter to his good friend, Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, recommending the 20-year-old Bill Moyers for an internship in Washington. He went to Washington, and something happened between him and Lyndon B. Johnson, who was a powerful man, Senate Majority Leader. But he took this boy under his wing, took him in as perhaps the son he did not have. And Mr. Moyers became Mr. Johnson's protege. He came back to Texas. He went to work for the Johnsons radio station in Austin, enrolled in University of Texas in Austin. He married Judith Suzanne Davidson, a lucky move on his part. And he became a lay preacher, preaching in country churches around. He got a scholarship off to the University of Edinburgh to study ecclesiastical history, and that confirmed him in his desire to become a minister, the call to the ministry. His preaching in country churches was not about ethics, my friends. It was about sin. There were good, hard-edged sermons. The Southern Baptists of Texas demanded no less than that. And he went off to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, got his master's in divinity, and took a call at a little tiny church in a small town, Brantford, Texas, and he was good at it. He earned $35 a week, and he put his heart and soul into it and was popular in that town right up to the Sunday when he got up in the pulpit with tears in his eyes and told them that he was leaving the ministry and that he'd felt a call to go into politics, to a life of action. And that call was to come to Washington to go back to work for Lyndon B. Johnson. This was in 1959, and Lyndon Johnson wanted to run for president. He did, with Bill Moyers' help, and lost the nomination to John F. Kennedy. And when Lyndon Johnson was elected vice president, this was Bill Moyers' chance to leave his employ and go to work for the Peace Corps, which didn't even exist yet. But he went to work lobbying Congress for it. He was only, 26 years old, 26, 27 years old. He worked for the Peace Corps until in the fall of 1963, he was sent off to Texas on a political mission. He was sitting at the luncheon in Dallas on that day in November when President Kennedy was assassinated. Mr. Moyers made his way to the airfield and got aboard Air Force One and flew back to Washington with President Johnson and went to work as his very close personal assistant on domestic affairs and a speechwriter and then press secretary. He left the White House for a couple of reasons, maybe more. He left because Mr. Johnson, who had powerful trepidations about the war in Vietnam, had become obsessed with it and paranoid of any sign of disloyalty. And he felt that Mr. Moyers had become closer to Hubert Humphrey and to the Kennedys than he was to him, to President Johnson. He also left because he needed to earn more money. And he accepted a job as publisher of Newsday, the newspaper out of Long Island. He was there for a few years. He needed some more money because he had taken responsibility for his older brother's widow and children, and so he had to support them. He stayed with the paper until it was sold out from under him, and then he made his second big career decision. He chose to go into television and to become a preacher, a sort of secular preacher on television, which he's been now all of these years, a preacher of good, decent American values. He produced distinguished documentaries. He won more Emmy Awards than any human being ought to. He and every other award possible, and became famous for his conversations, his conversations, quiet, civil conversations on television, particularly the series The Power of Myth with Joseph Campbell, which became a big bestseller. Joseph Campbell fans, I see. All right, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that in due course. And he became the man whom we meet here this evening. He became this American father figure who sits up at the end of the national dining table and leads the conversation in a more high-minded direction than you and I might wish. But there he is. There isn't any meanness in Bill Moyers. There's no gossipiness. And so people feel better for watching him on TV. You might enjoy watching other things more, but you feel better about yourself when you've seen Bill Moyers. In that sense, he's a lot like going to church itself. So here he is. He is a giant in our midst. Recently announced his retirement, whatever that may mean, but he's got a lot of work yet to do, as we will try to point out to him here this evening. He is underneath this laconic, easygoing Southern exterior. He is a very ambitious, very hardworking man who drives the people who work for him hard.